So I was talking to a woman in her late 30s, early 40s today, and she was very interested in my observations on Mycenaean Greece and Egypt, Rome, all of these ancient civilizations and the patterns thereof. So, in honor of our conversation today, I will be sharing what I shared with her with you guys on YouTube. So, to start off with, Egypt is a fascinating phenomenon because the first Egyptologist was Thutmose the Great. Thutmose the Great was the first person to the first pharaohs we actually have good documentation of, and he was one of the first people to actually wonder, hey, how did all this stuff called Egypt get here? Like all these tombs, the pyramids, all this stuff, how did this all get here? That was one of the first pharaohs. So that's all my bottles jangling around the back of the car. I'm getting rid of all my small kombucha bottles, and I'm going over to only glass gallons for spring water because the kombucha bottles are just way too tiny and it's a huge pain in my butt. And I just dislike it and I'm done with it, so I'm not doing it anymore. But Egypt is basically a palatial economy. Egypt has the central despot, and the central despot manages the entire economics of debt. And if you disagree with that, you can go talk to the military. And the state runs the government, the military, religion, all this stuff. Production of food, basically everything. This is Egypt. Egypt is basically the situation you end up in when you have some person or group of people who have all of the resources and means of production. Like Egypt is let's call it a strictly Marxian society. It is a society that Marx described. My books are flying all over the place. It is a society that Marx described that is basically those who have the capital make all the rules, and that is the end of it. Because they have the capital, they have the means of production, they have the ability to produce things, so they just produce absolutely everything. And then they can outproduce everyone else, which means that they can fund a military. And if they can fund a military, then they can go conquer other people and then force them to work for them as slaves. And that allows them to continue to keep production higher than everyone else. And this is a really interesting phenomenon, because this is sort of like what happens in China right now. Like China and Egypt are very similar in the sense that you have this one central power. In China, you have the Chinese Communist Party. In Egypt, you have the pharaoh and the house of the pharaoh. And basically, this one central organization dictates reality. Like, if you disagree, they're just going to eat you up anyway. Like, they really don't care if you disagree or not. You are an insect to them. They are the great and powerful Oz, in some funny sense. They're kind of, there's many ways in which they are similar to Oz. I really hope those jugs don't break in the back of my car. That would just be a huge pain in my butt. Because they didn't really secure them with anything, so they're all just going to roll around and smash into each other. Oh well, whatever. I'm just not going to worry about it. So, basically, and I'll just talk about Asia a little bit, because I'm very interested in Asia. I need to know more about when Russia was colonized, when Russia was populated. I mean, Russia's had the Mongols and the Tartars for a long time. But Asia, it seems to me, is largely comprised of those people that never left Asia. I don't really know when people came to Asia, but it seems like Asia is populated with those peoples who never left Asia, and then the East Asian islands, let's say the Philippines and all those places, those are the people who left Asia. But like Asia and India are both very, very despotic countries. India literally has the caste system where many people in India are untouchable according to their caste system. So they're kind of like subhuman. And this is just the natural byproduct. Like they're literally like people who are like born to incest, born out of wedlock, just all the socially undesirable people become subhuman because human beings are imperfect, and we try to cover up that imperfection in the absence of what you could basically call Christendom. I mean, Rome did a decent job towards trying to capture and hold on to the light, but Rome's main problem was the same problem as Egypt. It's the problem, like Rome initially starts off as all these tribes of free people in the Etruscan civilization that's formed in the remnants of the Mycenaean civilization and Macedonia. And you have a bunch of basically powerful people. Like if you read the Odyssey and you hear the description of Mycenaean civilization, you have a society of incredibly competent people. Odysseus is the king of Ithaca, yes, he's the chief of his own household, but there's many other chiefs on Ithaca. Odysseus is just the lead chief because he's the most competent, but all the rest of them are very competent. And Odysseus's main brag that I find still interesting to the suitors is that he says, I can do more household chores. I can plow a ditch straight. I can plow a furrow straighter than you for planting seed, and I can harvest more wheat than you in a single day. Those are his brags. And I'm like, okay, so that to me is like my father raised me basically like working on rental properties, and like he'd be like, okay, you see here how people did it incorrectly and took a shortcut? Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to do it the right way. And that was how I was raised. And I see the Mycenaean civilization as very much in the light of that. And the Mycenaeans were contemporary with the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt. And it seems to me the Mycenaeans are similar to the Americans in the sense that the Mycenaeans could have been comprised of refugees from Asia, Troy and Egypt, and comprised just very competent people who went to all these islands so they could get a break from the despotism of the land warrior cultures, and they succeeded in that, and that's where people went to the United States to get a break from the despotism of Europe, which mimics the despotism of Egypt. And it's the same thing, and then America forms a republic because a republic is how powerful, competent people get along. And Rome had the same thing, but the problem with Rome was the basic problem of disenfranchisement from society. I think that Rome, again, because you have any power structure you build is going to tend towards corruption over time, because people are going to gamify. Like, if you build a power structure, there are people who are just going to focus on climbing the power structure to the detriment of the power structure, and it's very, very hard to root these people out. I mean, I don't really know how you do it, per se. I'm not saying I have a solution to this. I mean, I think the solution is competition among families. And I think that ultimately, instead of enslaving people, I think Rome's issue is like the issue of Spartacus. You watch Spartacus, and Spartacus kind of exemplifies the issue of Rome, as does the movie Cleopatra. But Spartacus, I'd say, does a better job. Spartacus, because it's slavery. I mean, no man is so wealthy he can afford the slavery of another. He can afford to deprive another man of his freedom. Because when all people are deprived of their freedom, the means by which new ideas are generated, filtered, and implemented goes away. And now you have a society deprived of new ideas. I think this is the problem of China. And this is why I think China will never outcompete the United States or the West unless the West really loses self-belief and like doubles down on fiat currency like crazy. Because, and that's a simple connection, any people that do not use gold as their currency do not believe in their future, because gold will be currency now, today, tomorrow, in 1,000 years. Fiat currency is paper, so if I'm paying you with paper, I fundamentally don't really believe in what I'm doing, because otherwise I would believe in the absolute value of the medium of exchange. It's very simple, but basically, unless we really stop believing in ourselves, Mycenaeans use gold, but unless Roman use gold until they start diluting the currency. Oh, the fall of Rome. Huh, funny enough. Okay, anyway. So, yeah, I think that we're going to be able to outcompete China unless we stop believing in ourselves, because China's despotism inherently filters, it prevents them from generating new ideas, which is why China will do cool things with the ideas created by the West. And, like, they're really amazing. Like, they have really great shipbuilding capacity. Like, I mean, their capacity for manufacturing is very, very impressive. And I think that we need to come back to that. I think that the gold standard would encourage that. I think we look at manufacturing in the United States before and after the 1971, when we took off our currency from any sort of backing, silver, gold, or otherwise. Now it's just backed by the soundness of speculation, which in the end analysis is despotism. This is a basic thing. So fiat currency creates despotism because it means that the currency is fundamentally backed by speculation. Because if you look at like 2008 and the housing bubble was unsound speculation. Oh my God, unsound speculation. Now everyone loses all their money because the value of the currency is fundamentally backed by the soundness of speculation in as great of a way as we can manage through fiat currency. So, but speculation is based on what's already happened, not what's been actualized, but it's based on predicting the future based on the past, not actualized past. Like, gold is an achievement, like that's a stored achievement, but speculation is belief that the past will be like, that the future will be like the past, which is inherently despotism. I mean, we're betting on a predictable future, which I think is bad, because the more predictable the future is, the more it's dead, the less innovation there is. And I mean, even in a society, it's really easy to understand this. Just think about any aspect of fiat currency, like the constant inflation. Inflation means that you can't save your money because it's going to be worth less. I mean, I'm not going to make this a fiat currency video. This is a Rome video, but basically, we're creating the same despotism of Egypt through a decentralized palatial economy. I mean, let's put it this way. So most of the money in the United States is tied up in the housing market. So if you own a house, you, like, people, like, they're like, oh, I couldn't afford my house today. If you own a house, you have an asset that's appreciating along with the housing market. So you're essentially a shareholder in the palatial economy, because other people who don't have that have to rent, and they're outside that appreciating asset. Like, they're basically stuck. If you don't have assets, then you're stuck on the other side of inflation. If you have assets, then you're on the right side of inflation. So essentially, fiat currency turns currency from money, which is a store of value, to currency, which is a medium of exchange, but it makes it bad money, because the whole point of money is that it's a store of value and that I don't have to worry about it. But now it's going away constantly, so now I do have to worry about it. So now I'm just a slave, and now I don't have the peace of mind that money in a free society was supposed to afford me. And I'm literally a slave, so now I can't plan for the future because I'm a slave. So now there is no future because no one's planning for it. This is exactly what Peter Thiel talks about in 0 to 1. Why is there no future? Because you're using fiat currency, morons. But anyway, so Rome has the innovation of being a republic based on, like, we actually need to have truth, because we have powerful people who will take issue if truth is not established. So we actually now have a means of establishing, like, Roman law is a means of it's a means of finding common ground for equals. Egyptian law is a means of suppressing your slaves because they need to shut up and do what they're told. Roman law is a means of finding common ground between equals. British common law and American common law are means of finding common ground between equals under the assumption that all men are created in the image of God. That is very, very powerful, and that actually constitutes an innovation. But I think Rome was basically Rome basically reverted to Troy. Rome and Troy are related because they both dominated land warfare, and they both governed trade in the region to a large degree. And that's why Rome, as it became despotic and ceased to be a republic, eventually moved back to the location of Troy and became Constantinople. Quite funny. Then, as Constantinople falls and we see feudalism rising in Europe, we get the Holy Roman Empire, and then power returns to the papacy, or power returns to the despotism of Rome in the form of the central figure of the papacy. I believe largely, again, to regulate land warfare in Christendom. There's this pattern between Rome and the regulation of land warfare, and the Mycenaeans, which I believe to be the higher order civilization, whose revelation is ultimately encoded in the Logos in our culture, this idea that the Christian revelation cannot be divorced from the light of Hellas, the Hellenistic society that followed the Mycenaeans. I believe that to be completely true, because I think that the Mycenaean civilization and its structure, though unstable due to the absence of the revelation of Christ, which is ultimately the revelation of God, which is the revelation that man is in the image of God, which is the revelation that we don't need to keep on worshiping all of these disparate archetypal figures, because man himself is the archetype, because we couldn't even understand that man was the archetype until we create a stable enough society in Rome. Christ happened in Rome as Rome was incorporating the Greek culture, and Rome was suppressing the cult of Dionysus from Greece. The same Dionysus spoken of by Nietzsche, Dionysus the Areopagite, St. Thomas Aquinas, and many others. And ultimately, I think is spoken of in The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross and The Immortality Key by Brian Morikatsu, where he talks about the Eleusinian mysteries, Kukion, the administration of psychedelics, Soma, the Vedic religions, and this sort of history of what he calls the religion with no name that seems to revolve around the consumption of the flesh of God, which is ultimately a psychedelic. I think that this reached its actualization in the revelation of Christ, who I probably think was dishing out a psychedelic Eucharist, because the symbols are just too much. I mean, even like the Canaanite wedding, like reading Brian Morikatsu, The Immortality Key, really just solidified what I've kind of always known, which is that Christ is fundamentally bringing in a psychedelic religion, because that's what brought me to Christ, was psychedelics. Was prayerfully taking psychedelics after engaging in purity rituals based on Leviticus. I'm not even joking. That's what I did when I found God. So, specifically high-dose psilocybin mushrooms, though Christ did speak to me on LSD. I feel weird talking about this stuff, but I believe, it's like if I had a good friend, Jesus Christ, who showed up and talked to me, like, it'd be weird if I didn't talk about it. Like, it's like, hey man, why are you ashamed of me? So I'm just kind of like throwing it out there, but I mean, I spend most of my time not communing directly with God, and being frustrated that I can't commune directly with God, and wanting to commune directly with God, and being like, why did I have those instances of direct communion with God? And then most of my existence is just spent being like, hi God, I think I heard a still small voice in my head, but I'll just I'll meditate and pray more and try to trust my intuition, and very few instances of actual religious clarity, but they happen, so don't give up faith, or hope. He who seeketh findeth, whoever knocks it shall be opened unto him, whoever asks shall receive. So that really is true. So, but anyway, though, I think that the Mycenaean civilization figured out that, like, they basically just end up reverting to palatial economics, though. And if you have palatial economics, you create despotism, which you need some way of not doing that. And I think the revelation of Christ, Odysseus is very Christian. Like, the way he treats Eumaeus, the way he treats Eurycleia being interesting, because Eurycleia, the old woman, is actually one of the most powerful figures in the Odyssey. She's basically the only person who could have thwarted Odysseus' plans, but she didn't. She's the old woman of the house, but she's the one with all the power. It's very fascinating. She insists on bathing Odysseus, and he cannot refuse. I'll just leave it at that. Go read the Odyssey. But basically, okay, I'll explain. So basically, the woman wants to understand who he is, so she basically washes this man's naked body to just give him an examination of his entire life, because she's the sort of woman who can know who a man is by looking at his naked body. Probably not in the sense that she's, like, promiscuous, but just in the sense that, like, she's, like, not naive. Very not naive. And, yeah, she's a very powerful woman. But so Odysseus is very Christian, though. Very, very Christian man in many ways. And I think Odysseus prefigures Christ in a lot of ways. I don't think I could really approach Christ without embodying Odysseus. Simply because Christ is so great that, like, how could I approach someone? Like, how could I approach the King of Kings unless I, in some way, resemble a king myself? But basically, Odysseus is... So Odysseus is very Christian in that he treats his slaves very well. Like Eumaeus, all his slaves, like, they even say in the Odyssey, like, that no king be kind ever, for Odysseus was like a father to his people, and they do not even remember him. So Odysseus has this ethic of kindness, and I think that the ethic of kindness works. Like, I think that you ultimately have to be a despot who empowers his people, and you have to identify who your people are. This is why the Godfather is powerful, because the Godfather takes ownership for his people. He's like, you are not just these, you're not my slaves, you're my people. Like, you're not the people I bully, you're the people I help. Like, the Godfather, Don Vito Corleone, is very much a servant leader in the spirit of Odysseus or Christ. And he's very much an Odysseus who comes from the same region of the world. So, I think that this is how, and like Batman himself even, where he fails due to his lack of being an Odysseus. I think Odysseus unifies Batman. Batman, the archetype of Batman emerged because it's become obvious that you can't open borders and neoliberal economics your way into utopia, because there are psychopaths out there, and that's like the people, like, it's like Batman's father who's going to go hand over all of his stuff. The dude's just on drugs and cracked out and has a gun and shoots him. And that's what Ra's al Ghul ultimately tells Batman. He's like, your father failed to act. Like, the man had a gun, would that have stopped you? No, I have training. Training is nothing. Will is everything. And it's just like, you have to have the will of Odysseus to come into your house and absolutely slaughter the suitors with complete discrimination in order to understand the mercy of Christ. Because unless you're there, you're kind of like, you're naive, fundamentally. And that's why our civilization keeps coming back to the Mycenaeans. That's why you can't have a free society unless everyone's like Odysseus to a large degree. Because how could you have a free society of people who aren't equals? And to be my equal means that you are capable of killing me. And like, in some real sense, it's like, you need to have, I mean, I don't really know. I think it's interesting. I think like the Scandinavians are interesting, because the Scandinavians, like, I wonder to what degree the Scandinavians are related culturally to the Mycenaeans, because anytime you get a seafaring people, a seafaring martial society that worships tricksters, I mean, this is a very interesting combination, though. There is, I mean, within the Norse mythology, I have to say that it's just less sophisticated than Greek mythology. It just is less sophisticated than Greek mythology, and I don't really know why that is. Maybe that's due to the lack of Egyptian influence. I mean, the Greeks had the benefit of being surrounded by the most civilized. Like, they had Asia on one side, they had Egypt on the other side, they had the Germanic tribes and everything. Like no, the Mycenaeans really had it going for them in terms of civilizations and learned people that they could pull from. So it's not really a surprise that the Mycenaeans were able to be so culturally sophisticated in their storytelling, whereas I just simply have to look more into the Norse, because the Norse, it seems to me, they just didn't produce anything even remotely in the area of the Odyssey. And then what came after was nothing like Plato, Socrates, or Aristotle. Then maybe you need to look into this more in the revelation of Constantinople and these later civilizations. So to try to tie this all together, basically, the United States is, again, like I said, the United States is formed from the people who left the despotism of Europe, but the same despotism is reforming unless you have technological advancement enabling territorial expansion. I mean, I think that's really the name of the game. And you also need, though I don't know if that makes it, I think that that does solve the problem. I think that because from there you can have people expanding and colonizing and competing enough that you probably have at least 1,000 years of friendly warfare. Like, I think the Mycenaeans' problem wasn't the freedom of their society leading to despotism. I think the problem of the Mycenaeans was the toppling of Troy leading to instability in the region. I mean, I think you need something like Troy putting pressure on the region to prevent, I don't know, I need to look into the Dark Age collapse more, but the Bronze Age collapse and the Sea People, to me, seems like you have Troy really kind of like holding the region together, and then after Troy and the Mycenaeans sort of realizing they could conquer Troy, you probably have a bunch of Mycenaeans trying, like, waging, but you probably have like a series of Alexanders. I think Alexander the Great was likely the last in a line of people who had a similar idea, and I think what they end up doing is, like, when you have so many Alexanders, I think you end up, I mean, I don't know, maybe they just spread themselves a little too thin. I have to really look into this. This is something I really want to look into more of. This is fascinating. But how does this play into today? Well, basically, the scientific revolution, which kicked off like the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration, all this stuff was basically funded and investigated by nobility, the nobility of Europe, who had the funding and free time, the landed gentry, the gentry who do all the gentrification we hear all about, to investigate the fundamental units of matter. Basically, that's where you get all the innovations in chemistry, basically. So, and science and Isaac Newton and all this stuff. So basically, I want to, though I think the Mycenaeans, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe the United States could become, the United States may probably become another, I mean, what the United States is trying to do is institutionalize itself. The United States is trying to, up until this current administration, was trying to redefine democracy as institutional consensus, which is basically just despotism. And that is not good. So, seeing as despotism is coming, in this sense, I think that the only thing to do is build systems that can resist the coming despotism. And I think that that's largely going to be done through the free press, through the sharing of ideas. I mean, this is a problem. The problem is, namely, I'll just keep the video going, because now we're kind of at the point where I'm actually figuring things out live, which is interesting. I think this is a very interesting point to be at, and I like this, and I'm going to keep this rolling, because I hope you guys learn something from it. So let me know in the comments below what you guys think, because I always love feedback. Just interesting to hear what people think about everything I say. So, it's like the woman today I was talking to, she was like, oh my god, this is the most interesting thing ever. And I'm like, wow, I guess I'll make a video on this. So, basically, you have all the parents of the United States have been conned into giving up their children to the educational system that it then trains them to be corporate slaves in essentially the hierarchy of Egypt, Rome, whatever. It's more Egypt, though, because there's less innovation. And Rome, at least when it wasn't acting like Egypt, had gold currency. So let's just say that the United States has gone from Rome, we've gone from Mycenaean Greece to classical Greece to Rome to now we're kind of settling into an oligarchic Egypt. But there's still power. So basically, I think retreat to the mountains, buy up all the land, own the farmland, own the means of production of food, own factories and jobs. I'm basically going to apply Fordism, like read today and tomorrow. I'm going to apply Ford's methods of horizontal and vertical integration, all his business practices, monopolistic and otherwise. I think they're great. I'm going to apply all of those to buying up land and employing people in New England so that I can end up owning New England and probably implementing some sort of rich dad, poor dad thing where I sell my employees houses that I own for loans. And like, Ford's basic idea is like, why would I pay you money if the money is just going to end up in the hands of other people? Because you have to pay it to them in the form of the mortgage and all that stuff. I think that's bad. I don't want to do that. I believe in high wages. But it's hard, though, because it's because of fiat currency. But I'll think of something around that. I mean, I guess you just pay people in silver. I'll figure some way of paying people in silver, basically. Because I think that that's the only way to actually create a stable solution for people. So then I basically would be the palatial economic king, but in the style of Odysseus, you know? I have my employees who are basically my slaves, but they're slaves like Eumaeus, who's has his own house, he's got like his own slaves, he's got money, he's got resources. Like, and if you're working for another man, you're dependent on him, you're basically a slave. But if he's Odysseus, it's pretty great to be Odysseus' slave, because you're basically better off being enslaved by Odysseus than being a free man. And everyone's society is a slave if you're working for fiat currency. You're just a slave. Like, welcome to slavery. I have other videos on why this is technically slavery, but it just is. Just look up Devin Young, fiat currency, technically slavery. So, basically, that is... And the reason for that is basically just, like, all the interest you pay and all the inflation, which is just hidden interest you pay, is just going towards the fractional reserve banks and funding their poor investments and just funding it's bad. So my long-term plan is continue to free myself. I'm already basically freed, so that I can continue doing research and using that research to fund my business ventures or to fuel my business ventures. So my business ventures can be based on actual innovations, because you see all these people who are like, oh, start a supplement company, but they're not manufacturing the stuff themselves. It's basically the same as all the other supplement companies that are manufacturing the stuff themselves. And it's like more of the idea of selling you on the idea of being a business owner rather than actually being a business owner, which involves actually making the stuff yourselves and actually solving the problems yourselves. Because if you're not doing that, you're not like really a business owner, in my opinion. I mean, at least you're not acting like one. You probably won't reap the rewards of one, at least from a forward standpoint. So doing that, innovating that further, learning more, continuing to educate myself, sharing my education on YouTube, writing articles, sharing the articles, basically realizing that there's a limited number of highly motivated, intelligent people in the world, and that basically over the next 20 to 30 years, I have the opportunity to reach all of them and get them working for me. And that if I can just simply do that and create a system that enables me to do that and pay them well, that like very, very, very well, then I will be able to employ all the competent people. And there's no difference between employing all the competent people and taking over the world. That's the brain drain effect of Rome, which is one of Rome's superpowers. And it's one of the superpowers of the United States. I mean, I see people from the United States. People say that Russia is the new Rome, but Russia does not have the immigration in the United States, and the United States gets tons of immigrants from Russia. Russia is basically just a filter for the United States. Congratulations, Russia. But you can't compete with the sheer awesomeness of the Estados Unidos. Sorry, like, it really is. It's patterns that go back thousands of years, trade routes that go back thousands of years, and it's like trying to change the course of a giant river. It's not going to happen. So, basically, I intend to employ all of those most competent people and use them to buy up all the land. And yeah, like, use them, they can use me, and we all use each other. Buy up all the land in New England, base stuff out of New England, because New England's basically unconquerable. And then when whatever happens, I can basically serve. I mean, I basically just want to like wait until like they're just waiting, I think, is really like the superpower, because I think that there's going to be global instability and people are going to be bankrupt, countries are going to be bankrupt, and if I play my cards right and the people who work for me play their cards right, then we could end up just waiting until like we just buy states. Like, I just want to buy states, buy like parts of Canada. Like, I just want to buy land in North America and create Hyperborea. Because why not? I mean, I just see that as the future, because I think that other wealthy families are going to be doing the same thing. And ultimately, I need to compete with these wealthy families, because if I don't compete with these wealthy families, then I'm simply going to end up going the way of the dinosaur. Because I think that what's coming is neo-feudalism. I think neo-feudalism is coming, but I think that the feudalism that defeats feudalism is the feudalism of the Mycenaeans, which is really palatial economics. And it's palatial economics with, I think if you Christianize it, then you focus on cultivating the strongest and most capable population. I think that that's really the point. I mean, not like in a eugenic sense, but I just think that given Ford's insights into production, we can now produce food at such a high rate. Like in the Odyssey, they talk about how Telemachus is obviously noble because of his well-formed features. So I basically just think that like nobility comes down to excellent diet, which I don't know. I think it's probably more complicated than this, because people have such genetic diversity that there are definitely people who can function with a diet. Like, one man's food is another man's poison. So there are people out there who eat a vegan diet and they actually seem to do well, but I would just die. So I don't really understand that, but I can at least use my position to investigate this and continue to build systems based on this. So what I'm really trying to do is create a system that builds systems of power, dominance, and production, because the money's not worth anything anymore. I mean, it really comes down to owning guns and having people loyal to you, and loyalty comes down to the Nash equilibrium of understanding that it's much better to work with you than fight against you, I believe. I mean, I think it was easy to be loyal to Rome because Rome had running water, so I'm going to kind of go by that principle and try to create and provide the innovations that, to those who have them, feel as essential as running water, so that I can monopolize the innovators to the same degree that Rome did. Because why the heck not? I don't really know what the ultimate point of this is. I think humanity is moving towards a collective enlightenment, but I don't really know what that's going to look like. I just think that YouTube, due to its nature as a technology that serves to be more revolutionary than the printing press, or as revolutionary as the printing press, I mean, it's very, very revolutionary. I intend to put myself firmly on the side of truth. I think that's the main thing the revelation of Christ teaches us. On the main thing, I mean, I can't really summarize the revelation of God, but basically, like, you can orient yourself towards truth. Like, if you orient yourself towards truth, you'll be more powerful than if you do not. I think that this is ultimately what's going to allow us to outcompete China, who I think, to my recent knowledge, is organ harvesting Uyghurs, who's this race of people that they just don't like, so they're just genociding them. And they're making them all do blood tests so that if they want organs for people that they like, they can just break into your apartment and steal your organs. I mean, that's just what I've heard is going on in China. I heard that so in Great Britain, the time to get an organ is 2 years. Lots of people die, I think, waiting for a liver. Time to get an organ in the United States, like 5 years. Time to get an organ in China, 4 hours. So it's like, okay, well, they're just doing that. They're just fucking stealing people's organs. Like, they did, like a triple heart. They did 3 heart transplants for 3 different children on the same day, and people were asking them how they were able to get 3 hearts on the same day, and then they retracted a bunch of stuff because they're just like killing children, taking their hearts, evidently. I mean, this is like kind of the end result of Egyptian politics, is simply like Egypt. You ever seen Prince of Egypt? He's like, I killed a man. You saw what I did. And he's like, no, I can say it never happened. I can make it like it never happened. I am the morning, the evening star. As I say, it shall be written. That's what Egypt thinks. They can just define reality. China thinks the same because they're kind of Egyptian, but there's this giant Christian movement in China, and they've adopted an outwardly communist policy, which is based on a Christian understanding of the world, but it's kind of very deeply anti-Christian, which is interesting, like the history of the ideas that led to communism and how Marx had Christian origins to his ideas, but I mean, they're fundamentally and deeply flawed because, though that's just simply the nature of reality, that power and wealth tends to centralize, but the Pharaoh's daughter was infertile. So there's this, which I think ultimately Pharaoh's daughter was infertile because if you just only have marriages for political alliance reasons and inbreeding and all this stuff, you end up producing people that are less than optimally fertile, because I think that's probably where romantic love came from in the medieval period. Medieval period was all these people who were basically having despotic marriages for political alliances. Not dumping on it, I just think it leads to genetic weakness. I think that they realized that there was something to like letting people marry who they love, because I think that like love and attraction actually reveal quite a lot about optimal genetic pairings for the rearing of ideal human offspring. So I think that's a very useful thing to understand as well. Like Pharaoh's daughter was infertile for that reason. But yeah, I mean, I just don't think a society, it's not even that I don't think, it's that it's logically impossible for a society that's based on the suppression of the inconvenient people to have innovation, because innovation comes from that which was not noticed, because if you noticed it, it wouldn't be innovative. So it's sort of definitional. And yeah, I mean, if you look at like the artwork in the Capitol building, there's the apotheosis of George Washington, which is like the apotheosis of Romulus, which is like the apotheosis of Caesar, which is this Mycenaean Roman mythological idea that basically ties in with what Christ says in the Revelation of Christ, where he's like, do you not know that ye are gods? And he seems genuinely surprised that people aren't aware that they're gods, because we are gods. I mean, thou art gods, like Valentine Michael Smith said, but I don't really know. It's all very interesting, and I think that we're moving into a world that is built on the revelation that we are all gods. I mean, we're certainly all becoming more powerful like gods due to technology. We certainly have the power to destroy ourselves like gods. It's very interesting, and I think even the architecture underlying our politics in Washington D.C. it's just depicting our apotheosis, which means our becoming of gods. So, and I think that to be a god is probably to act out an ideal. It's like Batman. It's like if you commit yourself to an ideal and they can't stop you, you become something else entirely. It's like, what's that? A legend, Mr. Wayne. It's kind of like becoming a god. I think that's like sort of the point, I guess. I do have this idea that I guess some ideas about quantum physics and stuff. I'll leave those for future videos though, and how basically the eternal recurrence, greater and lesser, like how some infinities are infinitely greater than other infinities. I mean, I don't really know like what the point is to this. Oh, I don't really know. I think it's very interesting though. I don't know what the point of life is, but I definitely think that if you don't play the game well, I think that this is kind of like a wrestling match. Like maybe we contemplate the point of life after we die, and we do that through the lens of remembering our life, which is either heaven or hell. I mean, I think that's certainly one lens to understand it. And I have some physics perspectives that actually make that seem plausible, so I'll share those in other videos. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. A little different from my normal videos, but I just talked to that woman for like over an hour, almost an hour today. She was just so interested in everything I had to say. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just make videos that are just literally what I was talking to her about, because without any attempt to really bring it all back around, because she was super interested. And yeah, I think it's just probably the power of YouTube and the power of sharing ideas that I'm tapping into. So stay tuned for more.